with Fanatic, and I am back with my second Fanatics deep dive discussion. My plan was to do these every Sunday, but since I missed it last Sunday because I was on vacation, I decided to give you guys, a special one here on Thursday. My Sunday one will still be coming out. But today we're going to check out the first episode after this video. I decided how many teams should be in the college football playoff, in my opinion. And now we are going to be doing who I believe will win the national championship in college football, my prediction for that. So I am going to be confident in these predictions. I'm going to take a look at every single team that I think has a possibility and run through the possible scenario where they can maybe end up being national champions. So in my opinion, there are 13, or before we start this Fanatics deep dive discussion, if you guys haven't seen these before, let me kind of explain. It's going to be no really editing, just kind of raw, just me sitting down, discussing a big discussion, or taking a deep dive into a big discussion, as you could tell from the title of the series. I do these every Sunday. It's just kind of like podcast format, except not really a podcast. But I have fun doing these. This is only my second one, and I look forward to doing many after this. But without further ado, now let's get into it. Yeah, let's get into it. There's nothing more I want to cover. So starting off, I think there's 13 teams that have a possibility to win the national championship. All right. Clemson, Alabama, Ohio State, Oklahoma, Notre Dame, LSU, Florida, Texas, Michigan, UCF, Washington, Texas A&M, and the Auburn Tigers. I did not put those in order of likelihood. I will rank the likelihood as we're doing this, but I'm just going to take kind of a dive into the possibilities for each team winning the national championship. So let's go ahead and start out for the top. Clemson. Obviously, Clemson, a lot of people are saying they have a possibility to win the national championship. I think they do. Yeah, I think they definitely have a possibility, or I wouldn't have put them on this list. But last year they won the national championship, but they kind of got very, very fortunate last year. They had a bunch of elite defensive linemen coming back. Their 3 first-round picks from this year. Dexter Lawrence, trying to remember, Dexter Lawrence, I know, was one of them. Hang on, I can remember these. Dexter Lawrence, come on, I'm choking. Hang on, let me just look it up. Probably should have had to research this before, but, Okay, so Cleveland Farrell and I know they were drafted by the Dolphins. I just can't remember his name right now. Christian Wilkins. So sorry about that. But they had those 3 elite defensive linemen returning, and they had the freshman Trevor Lawrence, who I believe they're going to have to rely on to win this. They didn't have to rely on him last time. They had to rely on their defense, but this time they're going to have to go all out on Trevor Lawrence, my bad. Let me go ahead and look up the Clemson schedule. Just kind of go over all their games from last year. Sorry if I just made a lot of noise. Yeah, okay, so their schedule last year. Give me a second. I think it pulled up the 2017 schedule, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it did for some reason. I don't know why. But, will you please give me the schedule? Okay, yeah, I'm pretty sure this is the schedule. So it started off with Furman, I believe. At home, they won 48-7, so pretty good start. Then at Texas A&M, they won 28-26. Actually, not really that impressive. I mean, it's at Texas A&M, and that's always a big win. Texas A&M isn't near as good this year isn't near as good last year as they will be this year. They beat Georgia Southern 38-7. What else would you expect? They beat Georgia Tech on the road 49-21. One common theme you saw them last year is they had some secondary issues and some defensive issues. I mean, against Furman, 7 points, not really a big deal. Against Texas A&M, 26 points. I mean, I guess. Georgia Tech, 21 points. That's a lot of points to give up to a kind of mediocre offense. 16 points to Louisville. I mean, if you're going to win the national title, that's not really acceptable. 35 points given up to South Carolina. South Carolina threw all over that secondary. And they kind of locked it down in the ACC championship and the national title and the semifinal. But again, I am concerned about the Clemson defense. They have been recruiting on a national level and doing it quite well. But of course, they are losing a lot of defense. The defense, in my opinion, will be a concern. I think the secondary, I just don't think they're going to have much good of a defense. And if Trevor Lawrence doesn't live up to every single bit of that hype, they're not going to win the national title. It's going to be riding on the arm of Trevor Lawrence and those young talented receivers like Justin Ross, I believe was his name, and a couple others. So they're going to have Trevor Lawrence really be the best quarterback in college football by a decent bit to win the national title. There's a lot of hype surrounding this program, and I think it's well-deserving, but am I buying into it? I wouldn't say. So I wouldn't necessarily. Now, the path for them to win the playoffs. Trevor Lawrence goes off. They have a suitable defense. Let me go ahead and pull up their schedule for this year. Yeah, so. Yeah, I've got it pulled up. So let's go through their games. So let's say they have an average defense with a really good offense. They'll beat Georgia Tech that way. They'll probably beat Texas A&M that way since they're at home. Syracuse, on the road against Syracuse, that's a losable game. They're going to beat Charlotte, beat North Carolina, beat Florida State, beat Louisville, beat Boston College, beat Wofford. On the road against NC State, another losable game, but I think they'll win that one. They're going to beat Wake Forest, and then on the road against South Carolina, that is a very losable game. So let's go through the losable games. They have Texas A&M, Syracuse, and South Carolina. So out of those 3 games, I think they might end up losing one of them. So then they'll go on to the ACC championship. There's no really competition for them in the ACC, in my opinion. So I do believe that they will make the playoffs, certainly. Win the ACC, make the playoffs, but here's the problem. I don't think that they're going to be able to beat teams that are also going to be in the playoffs. I don't think their defense is going to be good enough to get them there. So it's just unfortunate, but I don't think Clemson has what it takes. I think they're viable and a decent prediction, but I don't think their prediction would be what I would go with. So moving on to the next team. Sorry if I just made a bunch of noise there. But next team I'm going to cover is the Washington Huskies. So let me go ahead and pull up their 2018 schedule. So Washington's a very interesting team. They have Jacob Eason now, who I think is actually an improvement over Jake Browning. Will he be as much of an improvement to get them over that hurdle that they haven't been able to get over yet? They were the last Pac-12 team to be in the national title game. So it pulled over their 2019 schedule, not the schedule that I wanted. But again, will Jacob Eason have the progression done in order to get them over that hurdle? It's going to be interesting to see because we haven't seen much of Jacob Eason at all. We saw him freshman season at Georgia. He showed some flashes, but not enough flashes to get a distinctive case on whether he'll be great or not. So let's go ahead and go over Washington. They started off with Auburn, obviously a 21-16 loss. That was a tough loss, but they were able to recover, beat North Dakota, beat Utah. They actually beat Utah by 2 touchdowns, which is a very impressive win. They beat Arizona State, beat BYU, beat UCLA, lost to Oregon in overtime, beat Colorado, beat California, beat Stanford, beat Oregon State, beat Washington State, and beat Utah. So the Washington defense, I think is actually quite elite. Jake Browning was always just kind of a game manager QB, never really too special. So the question obviously arises, what if they get that elite QB, and what if that elite QB is Jacob Eason? What can he do for them this year? So Jacob Eason, and next year, if he's still there, I'm not sure if Jacob Eason will still be there next year, but if he is, I would feel much more comfortable placing a solid bet on Washington, because I think Washington's actually better than a lot of people are giving them credit for. They're actually quite a pretty good team. And I just realized I left the team out on my national title thing, so sorry. Sorry to you Oregon fans, but left you guys out, just added you guys. But again, I would feel a lot more comfortable going with a team like Washington if I knew how progressed Jacob Eason will be. Sorry, I just bumped my high-quality mic. By that, I mean these speakers on my phone. All right, moving on. So let's go to their 2019 schedule, shall we? Yeah. So let's go ahead and take a dive into this. Eastern Washington, they're going to beat them. California, they're going to beat them. Hawaii, they're going to beat them. On the road against BYU, they're going to beat them. At home against USC, they're going to beat them. On the road against Stanford is a very losable game. On the road against Arizona is a losable game. At home against Oregon is a losable game. At home against Utah is a losable game. So they have 4 possible losable games. Stanford, Washington, Oregon, and Utah. So it's confirmed, definitely, that they're definitely going to lose one of those. If I had to make a prediction on it, I'd probably say they're going to lose 2 of those. That's just me. I think that they're honestly probably going to lose 2 of those, which kind of puts them a little bit out of contention. And obviously they have Washington State, so I would say Washington probably going to go 10-2. I'm not taking a deep dive into their schedule. That's just because, I'm saving that for the schedule previews, obviously. But again, I think they're going to go 10-2, so I think they're good enough if Jacob Eason is good enough. So if Jacob Eason's just, a solid QB, I think they go 10-2. If he's an elite QB, maybe they go undefeated. They have the defense, and if it all lies on Jacob Eason. They're kind of in a similar state as Clemson, just worse at the quarterback spot and better in the defensive situation. So I actually think Washington has a decent shot, but would I place my money on them? Probably not. Okay. Let's move on to the next team. I'm trying to trying to go through all the teams, not necessarily in order. I'm just trying to go random. Keep things spicy. I don't get why I said spicy. Let's move on to Notre Dame. Notre Dame made the playoffs last year, I believe, as a number 3 seed. They did get blown out by Clemson, which is unfortunate for them. I'm just pulling up their 2018 schedule and their 2019 schedule. Now, let me know if you guys want me to, have this stuff prepared for these, or if you guys just kind of want me to do it off the cuff like I'm doing now. Okay. Okay, yeah, I think we're ready to go. Nope, this is the 2017 schedule. That's unfortunate. Even though I typed in 2018. Doesn't matter. Why does it keep on giving me 2017? Maybe I should have this stuff planned out, just a thought. I think this should be it. Okay, so I don't think it is. Hang on. Sorry, guys, this is really weird. Yeah, no, this isn't it. This might be it. Yes, this is it, finally. So they started off with a win over Michigan. They beat Ball State by only 8. They beat Vanderbilt barely. Then I think they kind of made the switch to Ian Book instead of Brandon W. something. He's not a very good quarterback, so I didn't bother to remember his name. Then they started racking up the points. So let's give you a basis. They beat Michigan by 7, beat Ball State by 8, beat Vanderbilt by 5. So the Michigan beating them by 7 I totally get, but beating Ball State and Vanderbilt both by one possession games is unacceptable if you're going to be a playoff caliber team. Then they make the switch, then they beat Wake Forest 56-27, beat Stanford 38-17, beat Virginia Tech 45-23. Keep on hitting my mic. They beat Pittsburgh 19-14. That was just kind of a fluke game. You know, we all have those once in a while. I don't get why I'm saying we like I'm controlling a team. But those teams have it once in a while. They beat Navy 44-22, beat Northwestern 31-21, which is actually more of an impressive a win than people are giving them credit for. Mind you, Northwestern was in the Big Ten Championship and actually competed with Ohio State for the first half. They beat Florida State, crushed Florida State 42-13, beat Syracuse 36-3, which is another extremely impressive game, and then survived against USC 24-17, and then got blown out by Clemson. So Ian Book, I'm pretty sure, is the quarterback for the year for Notre Dame. And I actually think Notre Dame has a decent shot. But the worry is, of course, let's take a look at their 2019 schedule. They're going to beat Louisville to start off the year. They're going to beat New Mexico. I think they're probably going to lose to Georgia. So that's one loss on their record there. They're going to beat Virginia, beat Bowling Green, probably beat USC. They're at Michigan. Who knows there? They're going to beat Virginia Tech, at Duke, who knows, beat Navy, beat Boston College, at Stanford, who knows. So Notre Dame, the tricky thing is, they're not going to make it in at 11-1. The committee does not respect Notre Dame, and rightfully so, honestly. They haven't given them a reason to. Every time they've backed up Notre Dame, they got crushed by Bama in the national title in 2012, and they got crushed by Clemson in the playoffs. So Notre Dame doesn't have a great track record against those elite teams. So you have to go undefeated for Notre Dame to make the playoffs because they're not in a big Power 5 conference. And I will bet anybody that they're not going to beat Stanford on the road. They're not going to beat Michigan on the road. They're not going to beat Georgia on the road. There's just no way. And they're not going to beat Duke on the road. They're going to lose one of those games. All those games are on the road. They will go down in one, probably two of those games. They're definitely going down to Georgia, in my opinion. They're probably going down to Michigan. Those are the two games that I would probably bet my most money on, even though I'm not a betting man. I don't get why I'm saying man. I'm trying to act tough, you know. But I just don't think that they're gonna win all those four games. I'm only gonna say that they're gonna go 10-2. Notre Dame fans might not like that. I think they'll be good this year, not great. So they're the first team that I'm going to 100% mark out of the national title running. Again, Washington's still in it. Clemson's still in it. Notre Dame, you were eliminated. Heartbreaking stuff here. It's like a soap opera. It's exactly like a soap opera. Michigan, moving on to Michigan. So Michigan they got crushed by Florida in the Peach Bowl. I've never been a huge believer in what's his name, Harbaugh. That's just me. I just think Harbaugh is kind of overrated. Let me finish pulling up their schedule. I'm probably gonna start planning this stuff out. It's kind of fun just doing it off the cuff, you know. Feels more real. But let's take a look at their screwed up that schedule. Let's take a look at their 2018 schedule. Okay, it just messed up my thing, whatever. Okay, we are here. Yes. Okay, obviously they started off at Notre Dame. They lost 17-24. That's rough, but then they started to turn things around. Beat Western Michigan, beat SMU, and they've been crushing all these teams. Crushed Nebraska, survived against Northwestern, crushed Maryland, crushed with Wisconsin, which at that time was actually a big win. Beat Michigan State comfortably, crushed Penn State, crushed Rutgers, and beat Indiana. So they crushed a lot of high-profile teams. Penn State, Michigan State, and Wisconsin. And all those teams at the time were ranked. They beat them 3 weeks in a row, 3 games in a row. That is ridiculously impressive. And then obviously, the fall apart against Ohio State, which they lost 62-39. It was competitive for the first half, and then Ohio State just ran all over them in the third quarter. So Jim Harbaugh, let's take a look at their 2019 schedule, because this is a big win for, not a big win, a big season for John Harbaugh. He has to start giving them some reason to be excited. Middle Tennessee, win. Army, I think they'll win that game. At Wisconsin, probably going to win that game. Against Rutgers, obviously going to win that game. Iowa's always interesting, but I would place my money on Michigan. At Illinois, they're going to beat Illinois. At Penn State, losable game. Versus Notre Dame, losable game. They're going to beat Maryland. Michigan State, always a losable game. At Indiana, and at home against Ohio State. So this is pretty interesting, because I think if they make the Big Ten championship, they're going to win the Big Ten championship more than likely. So it just kind of all comes down to Ohio State. So I think they'll either lose to Notre Dame or Penn State or Michigan State. So I think they'll be 10-1 going into the last season. If they beat Ohio State, I think they win the Big Ten championship and probably make it into the playoffs. If they lose to Ohio State, they're going to make it to another New Year's Six bowl game. So do I think that they are going to beat Ohio State this year? Yes, I think they're going to beat Ohio State, make it to the playoffs. Okay. The problem is, do they have the talent to beat Clemson and Alabama? No. I mean, it's just not going to happen. It's just not. So I'm going to get rid of Michigan, unfortunately. I think they have better chance than Notre Dame, but I still think they're going to go down. And in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of Washington. Sorry, it's just too uncertain, and I think you guys have to go. So, moving on to, let's do Ohio State. Why not? Let's transition into Ohio State. All right, got their 2018 schedule pulled up, or took their 2019 schedule pulled up. Okay. Is this it? Yes, this is it. Okay, so they beat Oregon State to start off, beat Rutgers, beat TCU, which at the time was actually a pretty big win for them. They beat Tulane. They beat Penn State barely. They came back in the fourth quarter. It was a pretty incredible comeback, to be fair to them. And then it started kind of collapsing. They beat Indiana. They survived against Minnesota. Purdue crushed them. They survived against Nebraska. It was a close game against Michigan State for 3 quarters, and then they just ran all over them. Maryland, which was surprisingly like the game of the year, again survived. And then they finally started looking good, beating Michigan, Northwestern, and Washington to end off the year. So, why am I not putting Ohio State in the possibility for the college football playoff, which I am not? They have the athletes. Still, Urban Meyer's remains are there. They don't recruit at the level they used to, but they still have some athletes. They can compete. Justin Fields, maybe he impresses, maybe he's really good. There's one reason I don't think they have a realistic possibility, and that is they no longer have their Lord and Savior, Urban Meyer. Now, Urban Meyer is, as much as I hate the guy, well, I wouldn't say hate. I don't really hate him. I dislike him very much. Obviously, I'm a Florida fan. Urban Meyer, don't really need to say anything else. Not salty at all, though. We've recovered quite well, you know. We've had some pretty superior coaches like Will Muschamp and the Beast, Joe McElwain, who's now at a pretty high priority job at Central Michigan. I'm sure they'll be in the national title contention very quickly. That's kind of the equivalent of Butch Jones being Nick Saban's coffee runner. But back on topic. They don't have Urban Meyer, so that's why they're not going to do anything. Ryan Day, I think, is their coach. I think he's a mediocre coach that happens to be at a great program. And I think they're going to go away from him probably at the end of this year, maybe next year. I'm not a believer in Ryan Day. and that's why I think Ohio State does not have a shot. So we've been through Ohio State, Washington, Michigan, Notre Dame, and Clemson. The only person I still have in there is Clemson. Them still giving a shot. I'm not even going to look at the Ohio State schedule because it doesn't matter. They don't have Urban Meyer. They're not going to win anything. So, ladies and gentlemen, moving on to UCF, one of the most interesting teams in college football. Some people think they're underrated. Some people think they're massively overrated. Some people think they're the best team in Florida. Some people don't even think they crack the top three. But UCF's a very interesting program. Under Scott Frost, I actually think they were pretty good. You know, they went from 0-12 to 6-6 to 12-0. That's the formula, basically, that you want for progress. Of course, they beat Auburn 34-27 in the Peach Bowl. Really impressed in that game. And that was really the only time I felt like they deserved to make the playoffs. The next year, they actually weren't that great, but let's go ahead and go through that. So they were in, I think I'm looking at the 2017 one. My bad. Hang on. Yeah, we're pulling it up. Okay, yeah, here we are. They started off at Connecticut. They won 56-17. That's pretty good. South Carolina State, 38-0. Florida Atlantic, 56-36. Beat Pitt, 45-14. That's pretty good. SMU, 48-20. Memphis, 31-30. Very close game. I've pulled off a pretty incredible fourth quarter comeback. I'm sorry if my audio kind of cut out there for a second. But then they beat East Carolina 37-10, beat Temple 52-40, beat Navy 35-24, beat Cincinnati, beat South Florida, came back against Memphis again to beat them 56-41, then lost to LSU 32-40. Now, don't get me wrong. I think they are a good team for where they are. They're what they should be, and they've exceeded really the expectation for the program. I think they're going to be about the same. They might go undefeated. They might lose one game or so. But let me ask you something. Would anybody question if Alabama or Clemson beat SMU 52-40? Or had to come back and got dominated by Memphis for 3 quarters twice? Would anybody question that? Would anybody question if Memphis completely destroyed them for 3 quarters and then they had to desperation come back and escaped against Memphis? No, obviously they would question that. And I just don't think that they're prepared. I mean, obviously for their schedule, they are the Alabama of their conference, whatever you want to call it. But again, I think the only reason they've been able to compete with these SEC teams is because the spectacle. I think LSU and Auburn have both underestimated them. Auburn certainly did. That's why they were able to get out to a quick start and hang on to beat Auburn. And obviously LSU beat them. So I'm not a UCF hater per se. Obviously, I don't like them. Just because I'm a Florida fan. I would love to see a 2 out of 3 series between Florida and UCF so we can finally shut the UCF fans up by them saying that they are the best team in Florida. That's ridiculous. Yeah, you guys have been good, but I mean, beating Memphis 31-30 doesn't exactly scream national champion, which they have a banner put up. I just think their fans are obnoxious. That's just me. Some people think the Florida fans are obnoxious. I get that. I think the Georgia fans are obnoxious. I mean, each fans in their own certain way are obnoxious. The only fans that I think aren't really obnoxious is Alabama. Alabama fans are like really classy and really humble. Well, they don't really have much to complain about with Nick Saban winning national title every other year. So I got off topic there for a second. Let's go to their 2019 schedule. Now, so I said that I don't really believe that they have a realistic shot, but let's give them a chance. Let's go through their schedule. Florida A&M, Florida Atlantic, 2 wins to start it off. Versus Stanford, very losable game. At Pittsburgh, very losable game. Versus Connecticut, that's a win. At Cincinnati, very losable game. Against East Carolina, win. Against Temple, win. Against Houston, another losable game. Tulsa, Tulane obviously wins, and South Florida, very losable game. Now, I think that they're going to lose to either South Florida, Houston, Cincinnati, Stanford, or Pittsburgh, or even FAU for that matter. I think they're going to lose one of those games, go 11-1, and if the committee won't even put them in top 10 area whenever they're 12-0, they're probably not even going to put them in the top 15 if they go 11-1, and neither should they. I mean, Alabama, with that schedule, would go 12-0 without even breaking a sweat. I mean, it's just UCF is overhyped and overrated. I'm sorry, UCF fans, but that's the truth. So UCF has no shot of winning the national title, scratching them off. Let's move on towards the bottom of my list for the Auburn Tigers. Now, the Auburn Tigers, I know what you people are saying, well, Auburn's in a bad spot. I mean, you did say that they would go 7-5. I did. But I'm going to kind of play devil's advocate and see the bright side of what could come up here. Auburn, I think, has a possibility. Hang on. There we go. They have a possibility, potentially. Hang on, I'm rambling. Hang on, let's put this up. Yeah, I got it up. Okay. Hang on. Nope, it's my thing always does that. Whenever I pull it up, it'll go to the 2017 instead of 2018. Not what I want. Really, really awkward. Please let this be it. It's it. Okay, so they beat Washington last year. That's fine. You know what? I'm not even going to pull up Auburn. Last year. Everybody knows what they did last year. Everybody knows their concerns last year. They weren't very good last year. So they start off against Oregon. That's a losable game. Tulane, Kent State, obviously going to win. At Texas A&M, losable game. Mississippi State, I don't think is that losable. At Florida, losable game. At LSU, losable game. I'm just going to skip over the games that aren't losable. Georgia, Alabama. So they have won. There's no way that they're going to go undefeated against Alabama, Georgia, Florida, and A&M, and Oregon. They're probably going to lose at least 2 out of those couple of games. I think that they're going to lose 5 games. That's just me. But best case scenario, 10-2. Now, is that enough to make it into the playoffs? Yes. Here's why. If it paces out in their favor, if they lose to Texas A&M and Alabama, I think is their way in. Because at that point, they would have beaten Oregon, probably top 15 program, Florida, top 10 program, LSU, top 10 program, and Georgia, top arguably 5, definitely 10 program. So those are some big wins there, and they would lose to Alabama, who's a top 2 program, and Texas A&M, top 10 program. So this is kind of similar to their 2017. If they somehow win that and move on to the SEC championship and either face Florida or Georgia, if they win that game, then I think they'll definitely be in the college football playoffs. But do they have the ability to beat a team like Clemson? I just don't think so. Here's why. Their defensive line, their defense is good enough to win. And Gus Malzahn, I think, will be at his best because of just pure desperation. He knows that his job is on the line this year and he needs to pull through. So it's going to be interesting to see it fold out. I don't think Auburn's quarterback situation is good enough. I think that's going to be a thing kind of holding them back. Because you notice in all of their seasons, they had an elite quarterback that they've done some good. 2010, Cam Newton. 2013, Nick Marshall. 2017, Jarrett Stidham. What's it going to be, Bo Nix? I mean, I think Bo Nix is probably most likely to be the starting QB, and he's just a freshman. I mean, they don't have a great QB lined up, at least right now. Joey Gatewood's the other guy. I think he's probably the best move. But again, he's not a SEC winning, Georgia beating, LSU beating, Florida beating type player. So in the end, I just don't think Auburn has the quarterback to do it. So unfortunately for you Auburn fans, you are off my possible list of national championship contenders. So let's go ahead and move on to kind of the middle of the list for, let's do LSU. So LSU, a lot of hype has been surrounding LSU this year. They have been taking recruiting nationally, so good for them. They're starting to make some progress. I'm still not a big believer in Ed Orgeron. I just don't think he's really that great. I mean, the perfect scenario right now for LSU, the only way I think that they could ever win a national title in the next couple of years is if they fire Ed Orgeron and get Urban Meyer. I think they'll always be a top 10, top 15 at worst program with Ed Orgeron, but they'll get to the top 5, top 3 in the first program, arguably with Urban Meyer. Or if Urban Meyer gets there, he'll have everything he needs to kind of get this program back on track. I like how my solution to everything is just Urban Meyer. LSU, Urban Meyer. Florida State, Urban Meyer. USC, Urban Meyer. All these programs. LSU is certainly in the best spot out of that bunch. But let's get back on topic to LSU. So they started off against Miami 33-17, which at the time was actually huge. Everybody got really excited for the future of LSU because of that. Looking back on it, not that impressive. Well, I mean, it's impressive, but not that impressive. Obviously, they beat some small school. Auburn 22-21, which, again, at the time, super impressive, but looking back on it, not that impressive. Beat Louisiana Tech, beat Ole Miss, lost to Florida. Again, looking back on it, actually kind of more impressive than it looked at the time. Crushed Georgia, beat Mississippi State, got destroyed by Alabama, survived against Arkansas, beat Rice, and lost in one of the most heartbreaking fashions against Texas A&M, I think, in 7 overtime. So LSU last year, again, they're actually pretty decent last year. The issue was they couldn't beat the elite teams like Florida, A&M, and Alabama. Texas A&M, they probably should have beaten them and should have gone 10-2. It's just they can't beat Alabama. They're a great program, not elite. That's kind of been the theme of LSU the past couple of years. They're a top 10 program, top 7 or 6, but never going to reach the top 4, 3, 2, and even 1 status. With right now, at least, they are starting to get closer to that milestone, especially in the recruiting aspect of it. But I'm just not sure they have what it takes to be that type of program, at least not right now. So let's move on to their schedule this year. Georgia Southern win. At Texas, losable game. Some small school win. Vanderbilt win. Utah State win. Florida, losable game. Mississippi State, honestly, kind of a losable game. Auburn, losable game. Alabama, lose game. Ole Miss, Arkansas, A&M. So I think LSU, best case scenario, goes 10-2. They're not going to go 11-1. Okay, nobody in their right mind can say that they're going to beat Alabama, especially at Alabama. Right now, no, it's not possible. They're not going to beat Texas A&M, Florida, and Texas. They're not going to beat all of them. So I think they're probably worst case 8-4, best case 10-2. But again, we're making a case for them for the national title. So let's say they go 10-2, lose to Bama, and lose to Texas. That'd probably be their best loss. So they lose to Bama, lose to Texas, 2 top 10 programs in my opinion. But they also beat Florida, top 10 program, A&M, top 10, top 15 program, and Auburn, top 25 program. By the way, I'm talking about their skills this year. Oh, and also Mississippi State, top 25 program. I'm talking about them this year. So with that, I just don't see them getting into the SEC championship. Now let's play this. Let's say they're 10-2. Right, they lose to Texas early on. They recover. They get up back to the 4-5 status. Lose to Bama, get dropped down to 10 or 11. You know, the usual LSU ways. Beat a couple teams, Mississippi, Arkansas, get back up to kind of 8 or 7. Beat A&M, get back to the 6 area, best case scenario. Couple things go your way. You get bumped up to 5, and then all of a sudden you're in conversation for college football playoff. Now, do I think they'll actually put you in college football playoff, even though it looks like it? No, they're not putting a 2-loss team that didn't win their conference in the college football playoff and that didn't even win their section of their division. They're not putting you in the college football playoff. So, unfortunately for LSU, there is no shot for you guys to win the title game. So, moving on to, let's kind of head back down to, let's say, Oregon. So Oregon, let me go ahead and pull up their 2019 schedule. So Oregon has to kind of fight an uphill battle anyways because they're just in the Pac-12. That's just how it is. So they have to have pretty good record just to get the respect that they deserve and to even get a shot in the playoffs. So they started off last year. Let's go through their schedule last year. Hang on, let me make sure this is right. Yeah, this is right. So they beat Bowling Green, crushed Portland State, beat San Jose State, lost to Stanford in overtime, beat California, beat Washington in overtime, lost to Washington State, lost to Arizona, which is a freak loss, beat UCLA, lost to Utah. They were not a great program last year. I think they went 8-5 after they beat Michigan State in one of the most boring bowl games in the history of bowl games. I think they beat Michigan State 7-6 or something like that. But they did not look like a team that could contend for a national title last year. So why am I putting them this year? One reason, the development of Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert is an elite quarterback in my opinion. I think he'll be drafted number 1 or at least out of the quarterbacks, number 1 overall in the draft. So if he develops like I think he will give them a resurrected chance. And Oregon always has the athletes to at least compete. So Auburn, losable game. We're talking about the 2019 schedule now. Auburn, losable game. Nevada, losable game. Montana will beat them. Did I say losable game for Nevada? Didn't mean that. Stanford, losable. Washington, losable. Washington State, losable. USC, losable. That's really it. So I do think that they're going to lose to Auburn probably. I think best case scenario, this is really hard to tell. Best case scenario, okay. They're going to lose one game out of the Auburn-Washington, best case scenario. I'm not sure. I think they'll beat USC, maybe beat Stanford, maybe beat Washington. Okay, best case scenario, 11-1. Let's make a pitch. So 11-1. Let's say they defy the odds, go 11-1, win the Pac-12. Will that get them in? If they lose to a team like Auburn or Washington, yes. If they lose to a team like USC or Washington State, don't think so. But let's say they lose to Auburn and they recover back and then sneak into a 3 or 4 spot as the winner of the Pac-12. Do they have the skills to beat Alabama and Clemson? Yes, they do. What beats Alabama? Some people may say a mobile quarterback, which to a degree is true. You know, Johnny Manziel, Nick Marshall, Cam Newton, all those players. But recently it's been elite quarterback play, and they don't necessarily have to be mobile. You know, Ole Miss, their quarterback in 2014 and 15, Trevor Lawrence, Jarrett Stidham, those guys aren't really mobile. They just are elite passers, and that's what's beat them. And that's what Justin Herbert, fits the description of. He fits the description of an elite passer that could take down Alabama. So now on to Clemson. I think Justin Herbert could tear apart this defense of Clemson. So basically, in conclusion, Oregon has a legit shot to win the national title. I'm keeping Oregon in the running right now. So moving on to Texas. Let's do Texas, another kind of middle-of-the-pack team. Let me pull up their 2018 schedule. So Texas is kind of like Florida. They have a pretty incredible hype surrounding them. They're kind of seen as the second tier against the more elite. Like, they're kind of seen as second tier to Oklahoma, whilst Florida is kind of seen as second tier as Georgia. They're seen as formidable challengers for them. I'm extremely high in Texas. But let's kind of go through their schedule. So, let's see where this starts off. They lose to Maryland. That's a fluke loss. Don't get me wrong, completely fluke loss. Beat Tulsa, beat USC, beat TCU, beat Kansas State, beat Oklahoma. An amazing stretch right there. They beat Baylor, continuing on. Oklahoma State in kind of another fluke loss in my opinion. West Virginia in a heartbreaking loss. Texas Tech, Iowa State, and Kansas. So they could have easily gone 12-0. And that is not an over-exaggeration. They were good enough to go 12-0 last year. If Will Greer doesn't go off against Texas and the defense makes a big play, they beat West Virginia. If Oklahoma State isn't able to squeeze it out, they beat them. If they would have brought their A game against Maryland, they beat Maryland. So they went 9-3, but it could have easily been 12-0. So moving on to their 2019 schedule. La Tech, they're going to beat them. LSU, losable game. Rice, they're going to beat them. Oklahoma State, there's no way they're losing back-to-back to them. West Virginia, probably not a losable game. Oklahoma, they're going to split between LSU and Oklahoma, best case scenario. There's no way they beat both, even though they are at home for both. There's not really any losable games I see rest on the schedule, so I think that they're going to go 11-1, and they're going to meet 11-1 Oklahoma in the conference championship. So, let's go best case scenario. They beat LSU, their only loss is to Oklahoma, because we know how powerful a rematch can be. When you look at the history, usually the team that wins the first one, but then the rematch, the team that lost wins. I mean, Georgia in the 2017 SEC title game against Auburn, and Oklahoma last year against Texas, except this time, if things go Texas's way and they lose to Oklahoma in the regular season and then beat them in the conference championship, I think they'll be in the playoffs. It'll be kind of similar to what Oklahoma did last year, so I think they'll be in the playoffs definitely if that happens. If they beat Oklahoma, then lose to them in the rematch, then they're not going to make the playoffs. But we're playing best case scenario for all these teams. So by that standard, they make the playoffs. Now, again, I think they have the ability to beat teams like Alabama and Clemson. Again, it all comes down to elite play from the quarterback. And Alabama and Clemson don't have fabulous defenses. They're mostly prioritizing offense over defense. And Texas has a good enough defense to compete with these teams if Sam Ehlinger brings his A game. So if Sam Ehlinger progresses like a lot of people expect he will, Texas has a legit shot to be national champions. So I'm keeping them in the running as well. So, hang on, let me go ahead and scratch out a couple teams. Scratch out Oregon. Keep Texas. Okay, so right now it is Clemson. Hang on, no, I said Oregon. I have a legit shot. So right now, Texas, Oregon, Clemson have a shot. Hang on, my charger just screwed up. So let's move on to who do I want to do here? Oklahoma. Let's kind of keep the Big 12 trend rolling here. So I have their 2019 schedule pulled up. Starting to get a little tired here, not going to lie. I probably shouldn't record these at night. That's when it's quiet and I don't have to worry about being loud. So let's go ahead and run through their 2018 schedule. I'm on their 2017 schedule. Why does it do that? Okay, here's their 2018 schedule. Crush FAU, crush UCLA, beat Iowa State, survive the comeback against Army, crush Baylor, lose to Texas. They win the rest of their games pretty convincingly, except for that Oklahoma State game, which they survived. Well, Oklahoma State was actually like a major spoilers last year. Good for them. But for the most part, Oklahoma looked pretty good in the rest of the season. Obviously, they lost to Alabama by 11, which compared to them getting off to a 28-0 start, they actually were the better team than Alabama for more than half the game. So I think for a majority of the game, Oklahoma was the better team. Is that to say that they're better than Alabama? No. So Oklahoma, okay, so let's kind of run through this. They start off against Houston. They'll beat Houston. South Dakota, they'll beat them. UCLA, they'll beat them. Texas Tech, they'll beat them. Kansas, they'll beat them. Texas, losable game. So really their only losable game I think they're going to lose one game. They'll slip up in either Iowa State, West Virginia, Kansas State, one of those games, or they'll just outright lose to Texas, or they'll slip up somehow against Houston or UCLA. They're going to lose a game. So it's kind of the Texas situation. If Oklahoma beats Texas, I think that they don't. But if they slip up against some less team like Iowa State, and actually, let's say they lose to Texas, top 10 program at this point, come back, beat Texas in Big 10 or Big 12 championship, they're in the playoffs. It's kind of the Texas situation. And I said Texas has a legit shot to win the national championship, and same with Oklahoma. Obviously, the worry is Jalen Hurts' progression. I think he'll be fine. Lincoln Riley's incredible with quarterbacks, and we all know what Jalen Hurts can do, as we saw him against Georgia in the SEC title game. Okay, so right now, Oklahoma, Texas, both of them I think have a realistic shot. Clemson, and I haven't done A&M, Florida, and Bama yet. Let's go ahead and do A&M. Yeah, but leave feedback about how I can improve this series down in the comments, because this is actually a pretty fun thing to do. Not going to lie, I enjoy it. It's kind of fun taking a really deep dive into all these teams' schedules. Not schedules, but just those big questions that you wouldn't normally think about, or wouldn't put in that much research to. So Northwestern State for Texas A&M, this was last year. They beat Northwestern State, lost barely to Clemson, lost to Alabama, survived against Arkansas, beat Kentucky in overtime, survived against South Carolina. They survived a lot. They won a lot of close games. That's how they were successful last year. Which games did they lose? They lost to Auburn, Mississippi State. Well, I didn't even realize. That was a rough two-stretch. Yeah, they lost 4 games. They lost to Clemson and Alabama, understandable. Lost to Auburn, understandable. The only real loss that I think was bad was Mississippi State. So they could have easily gone 10-2 last year. So let's move on to the 2019 schedule. But I am kind of buying in halfway to the hype. I believe I actually had them winning the West for a little while. I switch on that every single day. But they're going to split. Best case scenario, they split between Alabama and Clemson. So best case scenario, they split between those two teams. Obviously, you have Auburn. I think best case scenario is kind of... Oh, man, this is hard to tell. This is quite hard to tell. Best case scenario is 10-2. They lose against a team like Georgia or LSU or South Carolina. They beat Bama and they lose to Clemson. By that standard, they win the West and they go on to the championship. Now, I would not put it by the SEC to put a 2-loss SEC champion in. If Auburn would have won against Georgia in 2017, they would have done that, and Auburn probably would have been going in at number 2. Because if they lose to Clemson, top 5 program, they'll be in the playoffs as well. If they lose to Georgia, Georgia has a realistic shot to be in the playoffs as well. And here's the funny thing. If Georgia turns out to be in the SEC championship and their losses to Georgia, I think they have a realistic shot to win. So A&M, they go in at 10-2. But here's the issue. Can they beat teams like Clemson, Texas, Oklahoma? Not yet. They have a lot of young players, and I just don't think that they have enough veterans to simply get it done, which is unfortunate for A&M fans. I'm buying into the hype. I think they could actually realistically make the college football playoff, but in the end, they don't have the leaders that these other teams do. So A&M, unfortunately, I am scratching you off. So let's go ahead and move on to Florida. So Florida, as you know, is my favorite team, and in my schedule preview, I had them going 11-1 and winning the SEC. It all comes down to just kind of the progression of Felipe Franks and the worry about the offensive line. I think the offensive line kind of unlocks the key to all Florida's potential. If the offensive line is at least average, we should have a very good offense and a very realistic shot to make the playoffs and at least win the SEC. So let's go over last year's schedule. Crushed Charleston Southern. Lost to Kentucky. That was a pretty rough loss. Beat Colorado State. Crushed Tennessee. Survived against Mississippi State. Beat LSU, which was nice. Came back against Vanderbilt. Obviously lost to Georgia. We just weren't ready yet. Missouri, kind of a fluke loss, not going to lie. Not because they weren't better. They were better at that point. But we just had our minds on Florida. South Carolina, thank goodness we came back and won that one. That South Carolina loss kind of put us on the end game stretch as we beat Idaho, Florida State, and Michigan, all very convincingly. I think we beat them all by more than 3 possessions. I know we beat Idaho by a bunch of possessions. Yeah, I think we blew out Florida State and Michigan. That's all you really need to know. But let's move on to the 2019 schedule. So in the 2019 schedule, you have Miami. Some people are saying this is losable. It's not. I'm just going to say it. It's not. Tennessee Martin at Kentucky. That's losable. At home against Tennessee, we're going to win that one. Auburn, LSU, South Carolina, and Georgia. I think we're going to lose one of those games out of that series. So, best case scenario, we lose to either Auburn, South Carolina, or LSU. And we go 11-1, winning the East, going on to the SEC championship. We win that game, we go to the playoffs. Again, this is realistic. Will I put my money on it? Probably not. But then we head to the playoffs. At this point, are we prepared yet to beat some of these elite teams? No, we are not. I think we are a year away from actually having a realistic shot to the national title. I don't think Felipe Franks is ready yet. I don't think we have the right team right now. Obviously, the offensive line concerns. We'd get demolished if we were in the playoffs, and especially in the national title. Some of these teams have truly elite defensive lines that I think would just eat us up and would be a general cause for concern. So Florida, unfortunately, this kind of shows my unbias. I'm scratching you out. So let's move on to our last team out of the 14, Alabama. Okay, so once we get through with Alabama, that gets down to the fun part. Okay, this is their 2019 schedule, so 2018, Alabama. Okay. That's their 2017 schedule. I've done it again. Okay. So, they crushed Louisville, crushed Arkansas State, crushed Ole Miss, crushed Texas A&M, crushed Louisiana, crushed Arkansas, crushed Missouri, crushed Tennessee, crushed LSU, crushed Mississippi State, crushed Citadel, crushed Auburn. All right. And then they came back against Georgia, survived, got out to a quick lead against Oklahoma. Whenever you really look at it, they actually weren't that great. Georgia was the better team for 3 quarters, and then they were barely able to come back to beat them. Oklahoma was the better team for more than half the game, and Clemson was the better team for all of the game. So Georgia, Oklahoma, Clemson, all those games, Alabama was not the better team for the majority of it. Most of those teams dominated them for the most part. So really at the end, Alabama got kind of exposed by Georgia, Oklahoma, and Clemson. If they don't bring in Jalen Hurts, Georgia beats them. If Alabama doesn't get off to the quick start, Oklahoma beats them, and obviously Clemson crushed them. I don't think it was that bad. I don't think it was as bad as the 44-16 score dictates. Obviously it was bad, but not world-breaking type of stuff. Let's go ahead. There's not really any cause for concern in my opinion. Obviously they lost some key factors, but their offense is going to be elite. With Tua, they have the best wide receiver core in the country. Obviously Alabama's always going to have a pretty good defense, even if it's not elite like it used to be. It'll be good. And with their elite offense, they're going to be pretty good. So Duke, win. New Mexico State, win. South Carolina, maybe a losable game. Texas A&M, all these games. It's very possible they go 12-0. Let's play best case scenario. They go 12-0, win the SEC title game. Obviously, Alabama has a realistic shot to make the national title game. Unless Tua gets injured, that's the only way I see them not having a realistic shot. So, Alabama, you make the cut. So, out of the 14 teams we started off with, 4 teams have made the final cut. Texas, Oklahoma, 2 Big 12 teams, the Big 12 representing. ACC's Clemson, and SEC's Alabama. So, let's go through this. All right, so Oklahoma and Clemson. If I had to place my money on it, here's where my opinion really comes in. I think this is really, really tough. Very tough. I think Oklahoma has a better shot than Texas. I think Texas beats them in the regular season because they're at home. Oklahoma comes back in the rematch, beats them, similar to last season. So Texas, unfortunately, you are out. And also going on to Oklahoma, their defense is too weak to beat a team like Alabama or Clemson. Oklahoma, you are out. So obviously predictability. Final two, Clemson, Alabama. I'm not saying this will be the national title game. I'm just saying these are the two teams I have it narrowed down to. In the end, this is tough. In the end, I don't think Clemson's defense is good enough. Alabama's defense is good, and their offense is elite. Clemson's offense is elite, and their defense is average. I think Alabama is going to come in with a vengeance. They're going to have a 15-0 season, and no one is, or I think they have a chance to go 15-0, at worst 11-1. They're definitely going to make the playoffs, in my opinion. I don't think anything's going to stand in their way, and that's why, my opinion, and the winner of the national title, in my personal opinion, is the Alabama Crimson Tide. Sorry, but I know that's not what a lot of you people wanted to hear. It's a very safe bet. I wanted to go for a wild card team like Florida or Texas or Oklahoma or, hey, even A&M, UCF. I wanted to go for a wild card. But in the end, it's just Alabama's the best, and they will be the best until Nick Saban retires. That's just the way it is. Their offense is going to be the closest thing to unstoppable as you can get. So I hope you guys enjoyed the Fanatics Deep Dive discussion number 2. I'm coming back on Sunday. This was a much longer episode than our first one, which I'm happy for. I kind of want these episodes to all be kind of around an hour long. Comment down below if you guys think I got this one right, or if you guys think I am an idiot who doesn't know what he's talking about. I'm sure some of you guys think that. But remember to take an unbiased perspective. That's what I try to do. If I was biased, I would have said that Florida and Felipe Franks would win the national title, and Felipe Franks would win the Heisman, and Dan Mullen would be the greatest coach since Bear Bryant, I think was his name, the Alabama coach. So I'm not biased. I ask you guys to not be biased either. Take a deep dive, listen to the entire video, and collect your thoughts at the end. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Check out my other Fanatic deep dive discussion, and just check out all my other videos if you guys are generally wow, this is elite. If you guys are generally interested in college football, my second channel, Florida Football Fanatic, coming out soon. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and peace.